And I also find this with young professionals as well, where everything is so important, and you really want that first job, and you're really eager, but it's a good idea to pull back. You know, and think about the fact that you're writing this to someone else, and they just need enough to get a sense of who you are. Any of you familiar with Myers-Briggs Type Indicator? MBTI? Okay, so I'm an ENTJ. So NTs really like big picture, you know. I used to work for an ISTJ, and when we would go through and we review resumes, I'd be like, okay, Linda, you need to stop. Let's just scan these things and get through the pile, you know, because she would take days and days and days on it. But anywho, so you're getting an NT perspective. I'm guessing an ST or an SF or an NF would say different things, but this is kind of my talk around that. And again, the good news is that we're in a profession where we can say a little bit more about ourselves. I always talk about my dissertation experience here. My advisor said to me at one point, James, there's a difference between the perfect dissertation and the done dissertation. And avoid the perfect resume syndrome. A lot of people write their resume and keep writing and working on it because they want to avoid the job search. That's been my experience as a career counselor. The several versions is great. If you use Aztec Career Connection, our website, you can put up several different versions of your resume, and I would encourage you to have several different versions, because even in career services and even in career counseling, when I've worked in private universities, the job descriptions we have for career counselors are very different than we have here. We're a bargaining unit campus, and the bargaining unit that I work for with regard to career counselors has very specific guidelines around what a career counseling job description would look like. So keep in mind that you could have one resume and trying to hit 2 career counseling positions, and you might go right on target with one and miss it with the other because of how the university is set up. In our environment, the keywords are really important. I would encourage you to look at our job descriptions and to use those, because when we have to justify our hire, we go back in on this, and the government's really big on this too. Check for typos and check again. And I would definitely talk to people who are in your profession, get their feedback. Really important. I told you about some of the folks that still contact me. And sometimes people have really far out there advice, and you're thinking, wow, I've never heard that from anybody, but this person's in this job and I should probably take their advice. My kind of gentle nudge would be, maybe you don't want to take that advice. Or maybe you want to try a resume with that as a version, but keep to kind of what you're finding in terms of the norm. Can you think of anything that you've heard about in terms of resume advice that I haven't got up here that you think everybody should know about?
I guess to piggyback on your several versions, I've heard like not a perfect resume, but like a dumbed down version of a resume, so that you can get your foot in the door. Because I've heard people complain about being overqualified.
You know, I think that can happen in some. I would say in this industry, I would avoid giving anything dumbed down. Okay, because you have a luxury of doing at least a 2-page document, which is really nice. And all the examples I gave you are at least 2 pages. Okay? So in terms of the advice you've heard, I don't know if it's more for like, you know, if you want to get a job and you just want to get like, if you want to, Kohl's is hiring right now. I just did a presentation with them. And they're hiring for seasonal workers, and they won't look at anything beyond 1 page. So if you've got this beautiful 5-page document, you need a version of this 1 page that they're going to talk to you. So around that, I think around that piece I'd agree, definitely. But, and Frank, maybe you can say a little bit about this. I'm thinking in our industry, and maybe you don't refer to education as industry, but I'm kind of doing career center talk. But in education, wouldn't you say that there's a little bit more latitude, or would you say?
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, I would say there's a difference between dumbing down a resume and streamlining it, you know, communicating the information that's most relevant to the position. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't devalue or, you know, make it less.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make yourself come across as less than.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, and I would say, you know, I've always thought it would be kind of cool. You know, I think about when I retire and things I want to do. One of them is to go into I've been taking classes at Graham College to do landscape design. But the other thing I thought of, I had a really good friend who was a professor at Northridge, and she worked at Trader Joe's, and I thought, I would love to work at Trader Joe's.
Actually.
You know, it'd be kind of fun. Yeah.
I've heard two things that I'm really curious about. One is a past supervisor recommended that whatever job I'm applying to for the experience part, I put jobs that were most relevant to that first, and then at the bottom put in the rest of my jobs. But then it kind of looks weird because it looks like I have job gaps. So I was wondering what you recommend.
If you do that, do two headings. Do experience and additional experience, or experience and related experience, or teaching experience and counseling experience. And then the person who's reading it will know enough that, oh, she's got two different headings for experience, and we can capture that. Because if you don't do that, it will look really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you, and I think a couple of the resumes that I put in there have experience and additional experience with teaching. Did we capture all the questions that folks have on this?
One more, sorry. I've heard that it might be a good idea to include, since we're recently graduating, to include coursework that's relevant to the job. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, like some people don't like hiring recent graduates, so it's not they just point it out that you're a recent graduate. So
I would let people know that you're a recent graduate by putting your education at the top of the document. I think I mentioned that somewhere in there. If I didn't, I'll probably mention it somewhere here. So I would not try to hide that fact, because it shows, for a lot of people, they're going to be like, why is this person applying? And if you put your, I always tell my MBAs, for example, put your MBA at the top of the resume for the first year, because people are going to want to know, you know, and they look at it and then they're like, oh, okay, this makes sense for them as a career transition. But the courses can make a lot of sense. Like, let's say if you're interested in intercultural or even careers, if you've taken a course in that area, you've done assessments, or you've done, you know, you've been trained in those or gotten your education in those areas, I'd put a few of them in, because again, you've got the luxury of space that most people don't have. I would just be careful, and I have this happen with my computer science majors. They put in every class they've taken, and I say to them, especially undergraduates, you realize that what you're communicating here is that you're an expert in this. You can't be an expert in all these areas. So pick a few. Yeah, but I don't think that's a bad idea at all. And try it, see how it works. If it doesn't work, then do another version. Did I capture all the questions on this one? So here's some places. I would always start with faculty, peers in your program, professional associations. I really emphasize secure online vendors. This summer, I saw this happen more than I've ever seen in my professional career. We had 4 or 5 fraudulent employers invade our system. And what they do is they literally hijack the name of another employer. They come into the system and they post for, and I don't think that any of you would apply for this, but they post for an admin position, like an office assistant, part-time, work from home, $15 an hour. And the first assignment is, we're going to send you a check, you're going to cash it, and you're going to send us back 90%. And you get to keep 10% just because we want you to know that we really appreciate you doing this unusual thing for us. The first time it came into the system, we had 85 people apply. And we got the FBI involved. The most recent one, we only had 25 people apply because I keep sending out these periodic messages. But I did meet a student right before the start of the semester who cashed her scholarship check and did this scheme. $3,000, which is horrible. I know it is horrible, but I mention that because if you start applying on places like Craigslist, etc., and I know that there are some reputable employers on there, it's not secure, and you open yourself up to a lot of risk. Even on our system, and we're a really secure system. We have very thorough methods in place to review job descriptions, but this was an example where somebody literally hijacked another employer's name, and the employer's name, the first one especially, was very reputable. And I contacted the company and I said, did you guys know that somebody's using your name in our system? And it wasn't just us, it was throughout the whole CSU. So check. If something sounds too good to be true, it is. Friends and family, and then our website. Our website isn't going to have a lot of the folks that you would see in like a NASPA. We would be more along the lines of, you know, traditional job search. But if while you're going through school, you want to look at something. Bridgepoint, by the way, who was at our career fair yesterday, advertises on our website all the time. They've always got you know, the academic analysts and all those positions in there. So if you want to do that while you're going to school part-time, keep that in mind. You're automatically in our system right now. All you have to do is go in and use your Red ID as your username and password on our homepage, and you can go in and create an account. We do other things online outside of the job search piece as well. Yeah.
Tarbox. And I don't know if this is the best time to ask this question, but I thought of it when you were mentioning some of the things you do online.
Yeah.
Isn't there a resource where students can do mock interviews, record themselves?
Right.
That's an process, right?
It is. We just bought a new vendor. We just contracted with a new vendor for 3 years. They're called Big Interview. And if you go into Aztec Career Connection, you'll see that as part of your homepage. Big Interview lets you go in if you have a webcam and practice interviewing. If you want to email it to one of our career counselors that you might be meeting with, they can look at it. Or if you wanted Dr. Harris to look at it, you could email it to him and say, what do you think? It's a really cool system. We have that. We have Going Global. Going Global sells country guides. And if you want to work or study abroad, and you want to know what the resume should look like, you want to apply for jobs in those countries, it's all set up through that system. And the nice thing is it's free through our center. If you bought a country guide on your own, you'd have to pay $50 for each guide that you purchase. But we buy it for you, so you go through. And if you want to do something like an MBTI, well, we have something called Type Focus for free. It's on our system. If you ever want to go in and just do a career assessment. We have others that are not on the system that are better, or not better, they're different, that are available as well. Yeah, so those are our 3 primary ones. Yeah, yeah.
I just remembered another question. What about undergraduate experience? Because I was told to take mine off, but I really am attached to some of it. So.
That's why we have the versions. I can't tell. It's funny. The older I get, it's harder for me to see things. But I would say to you, if it's relevant and you can make a case and you can talk about it, keep it on. If it's not, then get rid of it. I always think it's a good idea to have a resume that's kind of been going along with you for your whole life. Because if you're applying for something like a Rhodes Scholarship or fellowship or something like that, then they'll ask you to be very comprehensive, and you want to remember what you've done, Yeah. So I would say trust your judgment and make sure it's relevant. Relevance is the most important piece. Yeah. Did that help you out?
Yes.
Sure. Okay.
So you shouldn't keep something that's not relevant, even if you really like it.
Right. I had a panel of 5 local area professionals come in and talk to some of our STEM folks. We had such a good time the other night. And one of the guys was talking about how he was being interviewed, I think it was by Qualcomm, and he had an undergraduate experience listed on his resume, and he said, I just put it there because I think it's impressive, but I've forgotten all about it. And the guy, wouldn't you know, the first question in the interview was, I did this, I think this person studied it in their PhD, and said, what was your experience like? Tell me about it. And the guy drew a complete blank, even though he had done it as an undergrad. So I would say, yeah, again, be able to talk about it, make sure it's relevant.
It's hard though, because you can really stretch relevant.
But if you find yourself stretching too much, then maybe I want to take it off.
Well, I mean, like one thing I'm thinking about is I was the president of the International Education Council. And so it's kind of like working with international students, working with people from different cultures, coordinating programming, like organizing group members. So like that's relevant to a lot of things, but at the same time it's just, the club and undergraduate, so.
Right. Well, if it gets to the point where you're going into 3 to 4 pages and you need to get rid of something, that might be the thing to go on a certain version. But let's say, for example, one of our largest recruiters is Peace Corps, and if you decide you want to go into the Peace Corps, they're in our office all the time. If you want to go to Peace Corps, they would love to hear about that experience. Yeah. Haley?
Well, another thing is if you're applying anywhere at UCSD, their big push is international students, so that would be like another way it could be relevant to show that you have experience with that population.
Yeah.
So I think you can put it relevant in certain situations.
Yeah.
If it's getting to be over 10 years old, you might want to reconsider. Yeah.
I don't think she's much older than 2 years.
Oh my gosh, I didn't hear anything that just happened.
When I did this presentation last year, we put out an email and asked people about what questions they have with regard to the resume. So I'll briefly go through these because I really like the questions a lot. When should I submit my cover letter with my resume when you're asked? A lot of our federal employers won't accept cover letters because they have to, and especially the defense contractors, and I know that most of you aren't going to go into defense, but they don't want it because they have to keep it for 7 years, and somebody's going to have to store that either